Welcome to AfterlifeTV.com. I'm Bob Olson. You can find us at AfterlifeTV.com. And today you are not going to want to miss this interview that I'm doing, this conversation that I like to call them, because I honestly believe that if I did this for 20 or 30 more years, this will be among the top interviews that I ever do. The messages, the lessons that you are going to learn from this are amazing. Our guest is Anita Moorjani. Welcome, Anita. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here.
It's my pleasure. And just so everybody knows, you're in Hong Kong, correct?
Yes, that's right. I live in Hong Kong.
And I am just a couple hours outside of Boston, so we got a lot of distance here. It's amazing what technology can allow us nowadays. I love it.
Yeah.
Let's begin by just talking about your story. I'll just let people know ahead of time. This is the story of someone who has had a near-death experience, but with this major twist. In comparison, I could almost say this is not just a mere near-death experience, as if any near-death experience was a mere. This is something that we not only can learn about the afterlife with, but we can learn about ourselves and really what life is all about from this story. So we're going to begin by asking you, Anita, if you could just sort of tell us where this story starts. I think it starts with you being sick.
Yeah, it starts with me being diagnosed with cancer. I mean, to me, the story starts much before that. It starts from what I believe caused the cancer, but for all intents and purposes, the story starts from me being diagnosed with cancer and it getting progressively worse. And in the beginning, I actually refused conventional treatment because I had watched two people close to me die on chemotherapy. So I didn't have any confidence in chemotherapy. Also, the fact that scientists are still trying to find a cure for cancer, which means basically in medicine, there is no cure for cancer. I mean, everybody admits that there's no cure for cancer. So I didn't understand why I had to go the medical route if medicine itself admits there's no cure for cancer. So I decided to try alternatives. But for me, it didn't work, but I gained more understanding about that much later. But my cancer continued to spread. And over a period of 4 years, the cancer had spread throughout my body. I had lymphoma.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it spread from, in fact, all the way from the base of my skull all the way down to my abdomen, like through my chest, under my arms. Originally, when I was diagnosed, it was because I just had a lump over here and just where my collarbone is. But over a period of 4 years, it spread until my organs shut down. And then I went into a coma, and that's when the near-death experience started.
All right, and when you say you know these are tumors that are throughout your body, I understand they're fairly large. What in comparison? What size were they?
I tend to say lemons because that's what my oncologist said. He said the tumors are the size of lemons, and they were swollen glands and tumors throughout, like blocking my chest, blocking my lungs so I couldn't breathe, plus whatever capacity that was left in my lungs was filled with fluid. And so I was on a ventilator. I had an oxygen tank. My muscles had completely wasted, so I was in a wheelchair until I fell into a coma. I was either in a wheelchair or lying on the bed. I had open skin lesions because my body was so filled with cancer and toxins, and that my skin was actually opening up.
Wow.
So it was, it was pretty bad. So I had a full-time nurse who was dressing my wounds, the open skin lesions. I had one on my neck and one under my arm. These were weeping and open. And then on the night of February the 2nd, 2006, I was in a lot of pain, So the nurse gave me a huge dose of morphine. And on the morning of February the 3rd, I didn't wake up. and my husband noticed that I was in a coma, and he called for the doctor right away. Now, until this point, I was being treated at home with a full-time nurse. So on February the 3rd, on the morning of, it was the morning of February the 2nd that I didn't wake up, and my husband rushed me to the hospital. He called my doctor, and the doctor was there to receive me, and they basically told my family that this was it. My organs had shut down, and these were my last hours, and to contact anybody that they had to contact who hadn't seen me. But basically, that was it. They were waiting for my last breath.
And in fact, now, prior to this, you had been told you probably had about 6 months to live. Now you go into this coma, and they tell your family, what, at most 36 hours, correct?
That's right. They said at most 36 hours. In fact, the first, the oncologist, the resident oncologist of that hospital, she wasn't my regular doctor. My regular doctor was waiting there for me, and then spoke to the resident oncologist. And the resident oncologist actually said, "We never take in patients in this condition. Basically, she's just come here to die, and you know, if that's what she's going to do, we can't see why. We don't see why she can't do that at home. Why did she have to come here?" So that's
such compassion. It's all business. Well, all right, so now you go into this coma, and there's so much more to this story, and I want people to know they can go to your website at anitamoorjani.com, and the links will be below this video when people see it. There's a lot more to learn with this story. Because this is Afterlife TV, we're going to focus more today on the near-death experience and what that was all like, because there's so much to learn from that alone. But certainly, I recommend that people learn more about your story on your website. And let's just mention now, while we got people's attention with this story, that you have a book coming out March 2012 called "Dying to Be Me," correct?
correct.
All right, and so we'll get back to that later. And I do want to talk to you about what you think caused, or what you know caused your cancer, but I kind of feel like did you know it at this time? Did you already know it before you went into the near-death experience, or was it something you learned in this experience that you had?
Completely learned it in the experience itself.
Okay, so we'll wait on that, all right? And if we don't get to it, I'll ask you at the end, because that's pretty significant as far as I'm concerned. Major lesson for us to learn. All right, so the first thing you recognize, you're in a coma, and yet my understanding is you weren't even really aware that you were in a coma. You were so aware of things. Is that correct?
That's correct. I didn't know I was in a coma. I didn't. I was aware of everything that was happening around me, so I didn't even realize that I was in a coma. I could hear the doctors. I could hear what they were saying, and I was kind of wondering, like, why are they saying that? And I didn't feel uncomfortable or anything. In fact, the pain was gone. All the pain I had been feeling the previous night before the nurse injected the morphine, all of that was gone. I was starting to feel really light and free. And
so you're not feeling pain, obviously. I mean, these are memories that you're having of this, right? I mean, sort of, it's all in hindsight. You recognize that you had this awareness, but is there actual thinking going on? Are you curious as to why you're not feeling any pain anymore?
Yes and no. See, this is really hard to explain, because I would be hesitant to even use the word that I was thinking. It was more, I would use the word awareness.
Okay.
So I started to become aware. You know, I became aware that hey, I'm feeling free, and it's a very subtle difference between becoming aware and actually thinking, because I think awareness is closer to sort of knowing, but it's more an emotion rather than it's not from the mind. It's more a feeling.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to tell people now to really pay attention, because having heard Anita's story, this is going to be the closest we'll ever get to interviewing a spirit, to find out what it's like to be in spirit. So pay attention to this, because what she's about to tell us really describes what I would expect, and all the evidence that I've gained in my investigations in 13 years has taught me about what it is like to be a spiritual being. So you're lying here, you have this awareness. What are some of the first things that you're aware of, other than that you're not in any pain? Are you aware of what your family members are doing?
Yeah, I was aware of what my family members were going through, their anguish, their desperation. I couldn't understand it. I was aware that the doctor, I could hear the doctor telling them that these were my last hours. You know, I had 36 hours at best, if even. And then I was aware that my husband was frantically trying to call my brother, who was in India, to tell him to come here. And then I was even aware that my brother was already on a plane. He had sensed something was going on. So he'd already left his home, you know, he packed his bags, left his home, and got on a plane to come to Hong Kong. And it was as though my awareness was just expanding. You know, it was it still chokes me every time I recall it or think about it. So it was like I was expanding, and then I was encompassing everything. So I became my husband, and I became my brother. I was aware that my brother was frantically wanting to get to me before I actually died.
And frantically, so you're feeling his emotions, in other words. You recognize what he's feeling. Is he on a plane? Is he driving? What's he doing?
He's on a plane.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So he's on a plane, and you can feel what he's feeling.
Yes, I could feel what he's feeling. I could feel what my husband was feeling. My husband wouldn't leave my side because he was just sitting riveted, watching all the dials above my bed, and he didn't want to move because he didn't know when I would take my last breath.
And he wanted to be there when you did. All right, so there's no thinking going, there's only an awareness going on. So are you feeling any turmoil in recognizing what they're going through?
What would happen is that I would feel their feelings, and I would feel their emotions. And as soon as I started to feel those emotions and get attached to those emotions, it was like simultaneously, I would then feel myself actually being pulled away, like a detachment. And then as I would get pulled away, I would be overcome by this feeling of just unconditional love, like really unconditional compassion. And then there was this feeling that no matter what was unfolding before me in the physical world, it didn't matter, whatever that was unfolding, it was still perfect. It was still going to be perfect in the grand tapestry. And so it was like there was like I was being pulled away, not consciously. I wasn't consciously trying to pull myself away, but I was being pulled away from the emotions of everything that was happening. And then my awareness would rest somewhere else, and then it was like I would get drawn into those emotions. Like it would be my mother, for example, and then I'd get drawn in, and again I would get pulled away. And it was as though I would be enveloped by this unconditional love, and then again a feeling, like washed over with a feeling that everything is fine, everything's perfect in the grand tapestry, everything's still gonna unfold perfectly.
Absolutely amazing for you to be able to focus in on one person. You sort of did it one at a time, it sounds like. Focus on that one. As soon as your attention focused on that one person is when you could feel everything that they were feeling and even know what they were doing. You got people, you were aware of things that were, obviously with your brother who's flying there, but you were aware of things that were happening outside of the room, correct?
Correct, yes. Of the doctors telling my husband and telling my mother, I was aware of their emotions. In fact, it's like I became them. It's like there's no separation. It's as though the body keeps us separate, but when we're not in our body, it's like we're all one. It's like I was able to feel every emotion they were feeling. It was really like I became whatever I focused on. And it also felt like it was all happening simultaneously. So it was like, in that state, the awareness is like 360-degree peripheral vision, and distance is not an issue. It doesn't matter how far, but even the time is not an issue. It's as though everything is happening simultaneously. It's like now when I come back, and now I'm back in my body and I'm expressing it, I have to put everything into linear time. I have to explain it all and kind of try to figure out, okay, in what sequence did it happen? But over there, it was like there's no sequence. It's like our brain gives it a sequence, but over there, there's no sequence. It's like it's all happening, and I'm aware of it all, and it's just wherever my awareness rests, that's what unfolds for me.
What excites me about that is, and I talk about, what it's like to be a spiritual being. What excites me about it is because, people ask questions about their loved ones in spirit, and they want to know if their loved ones in spirit are aware of them. And everything I've ever learned or heard through mediums or people who have had near-death experiences, what have you, is that yes, all they need to do is focus upon you, and they're aware of everything that's going on in your life. They're aware of everything that you're feeling, and yet it has been difficult even for me to describe to some people that about this idea of time and space. And so if you talk to them, they will become aware of you, and they'll know everything that's going on in your life. But this even goes a little bit into the future. Did you have any sort of recognition of the future as well?
Yeah, future and past. Well, with the future, there was they had already taken a lot of tests on my body and tests of my organ function and things like that. So although the doctors had said the organs were already appearing to be failing, or and that's why I was dying.
Yeah.
I seemed to be aware. I reached a point where I had a choice of whether I wanted to come back into my life or go on into death. And there's a lot around there which I'll get into, but specifically about the future, I was aware that if I chose to go back into life, that my test results, which had already been taken, the tests had already been taken, the results would show that my organs were starting to function again.
Yeah.
And if I chose not to go back into life, not to go back into my body, the test results would show that my organs had failed. And so basically the diagnosis would be my death was caused by organ failure due to end-stage cancer.
Whoa. All right. Well, so this is very significant. All right, so obviously you're given this choice. So I guess we're skipping ahead a little bit, because obviously someone must have asked you to make this choice. Who was there in this? What would you call this place? Is it the spirit world? Is it some void? What is it? What's your word for it?
Well, I sort of use the other realm.
The other realm. Okay, I love that. Great. All right, so we're in the other realm. Here you are. Let's just back up a little bit. At first you're alone. You're aware of all these things that are happening. Eventually some other spiritual being must come into your presence. Who is that? How would you describe this? Tell us about it.
The first spiritual essence that I became aware of was my father, because he had deceased 10 years prior to that. He had passed away. And so it was really comforting to feel his essence. And then even the communication there is very different. It's not, see, people have said to me, is it mind to mind? It's not even mind to mind. It's like you become them. It's like you become one with them, and you just know. It's instant. It's instantaneous. It's not a back and forth communication. So then what I'm doing is I'm now putting words to what it was that was instantly understood.
Yeah, impossible to do, really, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And basically the first thing I understood when, you know, when I was aware of my father's essence was that it wasn't my time. He wanted me to know that it wasn't my time. But even though it wasn't my time, I still had the choice of whether I wanted to come back into my physical body or go further into the other realm.
So he's the one who gave you that choice.
He's the one who gave me that choice.
You know, when he first showed up, again, I know it's all happening at the same time. Hard to describe, but I'm going to ask you to try to. I mean, what is that like? You haven't seen your father in 10 years, and all of a sudden, I mean, does he knock at the door? Does he just show up sneak up behind you? What happens? How do you become aware of his presence? And what is that like?
Well, it was amazing. I mean, it was. You see, my father, he had really wanted me to get married when he was in physical life, and he didn't see my wedding. But also when I was growing up, we had a lot of cultural differences. So because he's very traditional Indian, Hindu, and I was more westernized because of my education, and somehow that seemed to cause a little bit of a clash. A little bit of a culture clash.
Yes.
My values were a little bit different.
Yes. I think a lot of us can relate to that.
He had wanted me to have an arranged marriage, things like that. So, okay. But when I encountered him in the other realm, what was incredible, I think the first thing I felt from him, what overwhelmed me was the unconditional love. And it was just overwhelming. It was just, all I could feel from him was just pure unconditional love. And it was, it's not like he comes in from behind or in front. It's like, you know, it's like, oh my God, it's you, it's Dad. And then there's this whole, it's all emotion. It's just pure, raw emotion of unconditional love, this feeling that was emanating from him. And then I understood. I just got it without him saying anything, that he had always loved me unconditionally. But when we're in our physical bodies, we're limited. You know, we think through our values and our cultures, and all these things are part of physical life, part of being in expressing in the physical world. But without our bodies, none of that is there, and all there is just unconditional love, just pure emotion. And that's all he had for me, and that's what he wanted me to know.
You know, I know you're aware of him, so there's all this awareness. Is there any visual going on at all with your father? And if there is, how do you see him?
It was not really a visual, but more just a pure essence, just like a raw emotional embrace essence. This is the part that's really hard to explain, because when we're out of our body, or when I was out of my body, I wasn't contained. There was no beginning and no end. It was like I was infinite. It was like I could be anywhere. I could be anywhere, and I could. So that's why I was able to be aware of my brother on the plane, and I didn't know that he was coming to see me prior to that. I didn't know he was already on the plane. So my brother is in this realm. My father was in the other realm. It was like it was like I was everywhere. And it's like another sense kicks in. If I can use an example, an analogy, if you imagine that you're blind and you're born blind and you're blind from birth, and so your whole world is just about it's just touch and smell and taste and hearing. So your hearing's pretty sharp, and your taste buds and your sense of touch is really sharp, and you have no idea what anything actually looks like visually, because you've never used your vision. And so even if you are given two plates that feel identical but are of different colors, and somebody tries to explain to you that one is blue and one is green, but you're touching them and you're even biting into them, and there's no way that you can tell what's different about these two plates. And the person says that it's colors, one's blue, one's green, and you're like, yeah, but what's color? They're identical. So, but one day, let's say your sight kicks in. Just one day, you begin to be able to see, and when you can see, then you can see these two plates are different.
Yeah.
And you can see what way they're different. And so for the first time, you understand. And when you become, let's say you become blind again, or even if you don't, how do you then explain to other blind people what is that difference?
Yeah.
And this is the exact problem that I have, because it was like a new sense kicked in, for which we have no vocabulary for, because it's not something that we use. And
that's right.
And that sense is, I mean, we say ESP and all, but it's like the body is not even in the way. It's like total 100% ESP, total 100% awareness of actually spilling out of my body and feeling incredibly light, and just being able to express and feeling that oneness with everything else, not just with every person, but with everything, with every character, with every plant, with every tree, with every animal. It was that kind of feeling. It was like I was one with everything.
I can't even imagine what that must be like. I mean, it sounds ecstatically overwhelming all at the same time. And to have this insight, to be able to focus in different directions, to have this reunion that you had, all of it sounds incredible. Kind of thing that probably most people would love to experience, except they don't want to have to go through what you went through to have this experience. So here you are sharing it with us, because there's a lot of things that you learned about life in general. At what point did you learn about what caused your cancer? Again, I know it's all happening at the same time, but let's just try to put it in linear. Did you learn this from your father? Did you learn it from, again, just another awareness about yourself?
It was another awareness. Actually, it was after. If I had to put it in linear terms, I would put it at being after I was given the choice of whether to come back or not. And because the first thing I felt, what I felt when I was aware that I had the choice to come back or not, I also felt at the same time that what would be the point of coming back, because my body was dying anyway. Because I seriously felt like all I was at that stage was a huge burden to my family, to my loved ones. And so I didn't see any point in coming back just to burden others. So it's like the decision seemed like a no-brainer.
Yeah, right.
Here I was, embraced in unconditional love, feeling light, free, no pain. But again, it seemed almost instantaneous. I started to become aware, like, of this great clarity, this understanding of why I got the cancer. I started to understand that I had never been aware of the truth of who I really was. And the way it is in that realm, it's really interesting. It's so hard to describe, but it's almost like the answer is so obvious. Why haven't I seen that before?
Oh, yeah.
Why did I not know this? it just felt so obvious and so easy.
Yeah. Did you feel like anybody was facilitating this information for you? Maybe your father, maybe some other spirit guides or something that might have been like help facilitating this knowingness that you're recognizing about yourself?
I did feel that I was surrounded by spiritual beings or other essences who I didn't recognize, and also my best friend who had passed away 3 years prior from cancer. She had opted for the chemotherapy route, and she had passed away, and she was also very much there, and so it was like they were all there. Their essence was really comforting me and embracing me, and I felt very, very comforted by all the presences of like familiar essences. And then the other beings were, I didn't recognize them as beings or as people I knew in this lifetime, but yet I knew that they loved me unconditionally. I knew that they were all there for me to help me through. And it feels like that even though they are other entities or other essences, yet we're all connected. We're so connected. It was like whatever purpose we all have, it's like we're all in a sense, we're all wanting the same thing for everybody and for the whole planet.
Yeah,
it's like we're all one. I mean, you, me, and all of them, all of us, we're all one. We're all part of the same essence. So if I was being helped, it was by all the essences, all the energy.
Yeah, amazing. So you have this whole team of people really who are helping you go through this experience. Your father basically gives you this choice of, deciding whether you want to go back into your body and live or stay where you're at, maybe move on to whatever's next from that point on. He gives you this choice. You said he sort of, does he recommend that you go back to your body, right? He recommends you go back. Does he explain why, or does he have to? You just have this awareness of why? Because I know there's some reasons that you recognized that the benefits to going back, obviously not just to pass away, to wither away.
Yeah, exactly. So he basically, yes, he said to me, it's not your time, but it's still your choice. But in a way, I could sense that there was a certain edging towards wanting me to go back. And then as the clarity started to come, and it was this feeling that how could I have not recognized it before? It's that kind of feeling. I started to understand that I had never loved myself enough before, and I had always lived in fear. I'd always lived in fear of being true to myself, and I'd always grown up trying to do the right thing, or to fit into my culture, to fit in with what people expected of me, and I was always a people pleaser. But in addition to not always being true to myself and always putting myself last, I also lived in a lot of fear. I feared life. I feared not being good enough. I feared cancer. I feared illness. I lived a very fearful life. And
what did you learn about this fear? Because I know you talked about being able to see into the future. You're even able to see into the past, obviously, all at the same time again, right?
Yeah.
And so are you able to recognize where you learn these fears, where you pick these fears up? Is that in your awareness as well, maybe from this lifetime or even other lifetimes? Any of that come into play?
It was from this lifetime. I sense that I picked up all the fears from this lifetime. It's just conditioning. A lot of it is, I think, just the way the world is. It's like whether it's from reading newspapers and everybody being afraid of getting cancer, all the cancer awareness campaigns, but also the other fears of not being good enough, of always being a people pleaser, putting myself last, putting myself down, always the negative self-talk. All that is probably just I got the sense it was all from this life, but it's probably just conditioning, generally just conditioning from culture, upbringing.
And what did you learn about this fear and almost self-loathing type of mentality? What did you learn about it and how it affected you physically?
That's what I learned was actually the cause of my cancer, at least for me. And it was in that realization when I realized that actually I and everyone else, we are all absolutely amazing, magnificent beings that have come here to express who we are and to be true to who we are. Why would we want to be anyone else that other than who we actually are and who we're supposed to be? All we have to do and be is to be true to ourselves. That's all we have to do. And it was the feeling, the sensation, the awareness. It was like, oh my God, how could I not know that? How obvious is that? Like, why else would I be on this planet expressing myself if I'm supposed to try to be someone else or try to fit someone else's model of what somebody is supposed to be? I've never checked in with myself. Like, who am I? What do I want to do? What are my feelings? And it's basically about following my own emotions, because in that realm, what was very real for me were my emotions. Just my emotions. They were very, very real. And I realized that I'd never checked in with my emotions during my life. I'd never asked myself, how do I feel? How do I feel about my life or what I want in life? It was always about giving other people what they felt. And it was always about putting myself last, because I thought it was selfish. I always thought it was selfish to love myself and to give myself what I wanted. But I then started to really understand in depth that you can't love another if you don't love yourself first, because you don't have anything to give. And I realized that only when I love myself can I actually love others. And being selfish actually comes from too little self-love, not too much.
You recognize all this, and is it this insight that makes you decide to go back into your body?
Yes, it was the words I would put on the insight would be, now that you know the truth of who you are, your body will reflect that truth and be healed. Those are the words I would put to that feeling, that sense that I got in that understanding.
And so we're really talking about illness starting at an energetic level, and then the physical sort of following suit.
Yeah.
And so this awareness eradicates the illness that's within your energy, basically.
Yeah.
And so if you go back, you are going to heal from this cancer?
That's right. So I became aware at that point that now, if I choose to go back, now that I understood why I had the cancer, I understood that my only purpose was to be myself, and that was all. That's the only purpose any of us have, is just to be true to who we really are. And I understood that at our core, each and every one of us, our essence is one of awareness, it's one of love. At our essence, at our core, we are pure love. That essence is just pure love. It's unconditional love. So if you are being yourself, then you are being love. Who else can you be if you're in touch with your core? Because if at your core you are love. And when I understood this, and I understood that my body will just reflect this new understanding, my physical body would reflect it. It was at this point that I sensed both my father and my best friend communicating to me, now that you know the truth of who you really are, go back and live your life fearlessly.
All right. And because we only have a few minutes left, but you and I have already talked. There's going to be a part 2 to this interview that I'm going to post at a later date, but which is going to get a little bit even deeper than what we've talked about, where we really ask a lot more questions about this. But why don't we bring us to the final part? So you decide to go back. You're back in your body. Tell us about that.
I started to come out of the coma. And as soon as I started to come out of the coma and my eyes started to open, I saw my husband standing over me. And then I saw my brother, and he had his luggage with him. He'd just come straight to the hospital from the plane. And they were really surprised that I was waking up and coming out of the coma, and very happy. My husband was like really pleased. He was almost like dancing on the spot.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, so he's a really great guy. And then the doctor, who I had never met before being admitted to this hospital, being admitted in a coma.
Right.
He walked in the room to check on me, and my family told him excitedly that I was waking up. So he said, "Oh, that's good news." And he came over to see me, and he said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you're up." And he was really upbeat. And so I said to him, "Good evening, Dr. Chan." And he said, "How do you know my name?" And I said, "Aren't you the doctor that was here that treated me?" And I even recalled he had removed fluid from my lung by putting a needle in through my back, and when I was choking, and I said to him, "Aren't you the doctor that did that?" And he said, "But you were in a coma. Your eyes were closed. How do you even know that I did that?" So he was really shocked, and then and that's when I realized I was in a coma, because I actually didn't realize I was in a coma. So I said to him, I was in a coma.
This is your first recognition of it.
Yeah. I had no idea I was in a coma, because I was so aware of everything. But I was very, it was still very blurred to me. It was like I had one foot on this side, one foot on the other side, because it was like everything had just happened, and I was still very confused. And then when he left the room, I said to my husband, "Why was he so surprised? Wasn't he the one that told you that I only have about 36 hours at best?" And then my husband looked shocked, and he said, "He didn't say that to me in the room. We were like down the hallway about 40 feet outside the door. The door was shut."
My goodness.
And I said, "Really?" and that's when we started to realize that something had happened.
And ultimately, you healed from this, obviously, just as you expected you would. In fact, you said you could see into the future a bit, that your tests would come back, that your organs were not shutting down now, because you made this choice. Otherwise, they would have come back that they had shut down. All this comes together exactly as you expected it to be. You healed miraculously quickly. I mean, right?
Very, very quickly. In fact, that was the other thing that I could see. I realized that when I was on the other side, in the other realm, and I realized that my body would reflect this very quickly, and I knew that it would not be months or it would be more like days, or even just a couple of weeks at the most. I knew that I would be feeling a lot better, and that's exactly what happened. Within 4 days, the tumors had reduced by about 60%, 60 or 70%, and within 2 or 3 weeks, when they were conducting tests, they couldn't even find the cancer. They did a lymph node biopsy, and the radiologist had to mark a lymph node in my body to biopsy, and he couldn't even find a lymph node that was big enough to even suggest cancer.
When just days prior, they were the size of lemons.
Exactly, and he had those original scans on the light box, and then he was using the ultrasound to try and find a lymph node, and he was getting really confused, because he was saying, I just can't find anything. And here were these scans showing that my body was ridden with tumors.
Yeah, it's a miracle, no question about it. The story is amazing. You're here. That was February 2nd, 2006 when you went into the coma. Here you are today, November 2011. You're going to be telling your story in this book, Dying to Be Me, March 2012. Very exciting. A lot more detail in the book, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of detail in the book.
And there's a lot more detail on your website, anitamoorjani.com. The links are below these videos. I love there's a phrase when you go to your website, it says, remembering your magnificence.
Yes.
That's what it's all about.
That is what it's all about, that every single one of us is a magnificent being. Absolutely magnificent.
So I'm going to end this interview here, and we're going to pick up a new one because these can only be so long on the internet. We're going to pick up a new one. If people want to watch part 2 of this interview, make sure that they put their email address in so that they get the announcement of it here on the page, and they'll find out when we post the part 2 later on. Just for now, I just want to say thank you for sharing this story. I'm frustrated. It's already been 46 minutes, and I feel like I didn't cover but a fraction of your story. And it's frustrating to me, but we don't have hours, unfortunately, and that's why you wrote the book that you wrote, right?
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence and your message. I do think it can change the world on an individual basis. It can change any one of us if we really fully understand the message that you're trying to give us. And I look forward to part 2 of this. So thank you, Anita.
Thank you. My pleasure.